All right, good evening, everybody. So once again, I'm just gonna touch base on the Kickstarter. I think the last time I put something up was on the 16 days remaining, so just a few days ago. But since then, I've had some comments. I mean, not bad comments, good discussional comments about things I either said in my last video or things I just saw discussed on different forums. So I thought I would just address a few more things, maybe clarify some thoughts I had from the other video, kind of show where we're at on the Kickstarter. And this will probably be the last video I put out, unless there's something else that comes up that's really cool to discuss and talk about, because the game's pretty well on its way to being published. So, we're good. We made it. Go team. So this is where we currently stand. I mean, I know, like I'm part of it. I'm not part of this. I'm just excited because this is a really interesting looking system to me, and so everybody that's part of this, we're part of a team. I feel sorry for folks that learn about this later and miss out on great opportunities, because there are. So let's take a look at where we're at. So right now they're at 27. I know I've put myself on the team. We're here now. So we're 27,680. So original goal was 16. So unless a whole bunch of people pull out at the last minute, we're funded. So I'm excited because I'm hoping, unless there's all kinds of delays like other games, July, which is great. So I have birthday time coming up in August, taking some vacation time. Be a great opportunity for me to get this out on the table, possibly once or twice, and try it out during that time frame. So very excited. So a couple things I want to talk about. One thing was, why did I not make a Sun Tzu example game? When second edition Panzer was coming out, they had put up a lot of sample counter data and data cards on the GMT Games website. They put enough information that I was able to actually put out a Sun Tzu module and do a sample game based on the materials they had posted. Wasn't perfect, a lot of rules errors, because just speculating on how things would play based on what they had available. I'm not doing that with this game because there's just not enough for me to do that. I mean, I could really speculate a whole lot on counter informations. Like for example, let's just pop over here to the Boardgamegeek. Where was it here? Here they had, boom, a scenario card. We'll talk about scenario cards in a bit. But here on a scenario card, if I really wanted to, I could have taken the time to cut each one of these counters out digitally, crop it, and then get them set up how I want in the Sun Tzu module format, and then put like these improved positions, and then put out these Russian tanks. The thing is, it doesn't show the backside of the infantry, so I would have to kind of fudge some data to make them look like they're on their reduced side, half of the firepower, something like that. So I can speculate, but there is enough here to actually play a full scenario. I've got a scenario card, and you could make a Sun Tzu module and play the first game. I just did not feel like doing that, but it's here now. If you're very resourceful, you could just print this and then make your own counters and play the game, because there's also a map section. Now the scenario obviously doesn't match up with the map, but again, for those who are really curious how this plays, you could print out a couple map sections, stick them together, and kind of make your own mini scenario. I mean, you're just kind of fudging stuff, but if you're really that curious, which of these two modules had fewer troops? Because they have two sample scenarios to look at. Let's see here. Lots of folks there. And there was like one more scenario here. So for grins and giggles, this might be more of a starting out scenario. So you could do this one pretty well. Take some troops, a vehicle, and some shock troops and whatnot. And then you wouldn't even have to use their maps. You could use any maps you have existing and then just kind of change the setups a little bit to whatever map you're playing on, and then you can play the game. You could, like I said, you just have to maybe modify some of the wounded stats. And there you go. And I only point that out because some folks were saying, hey, can we get some AARs? Can we get some examples of gameplay? Yeah, you can. Do it yourself. Alright? So that was one thing I wanted to share. It is possible for you to play the game now to get a feel for the rules and how it works. Do it yourself. Alright, second thing. I had made mention that I didn't see in the rules weather. And I just want to double check. Oh yeah, see, like here's an example of a wounded. It's like the firepower, it looks like they just kind of in half round down. Easy peasy. You can now print out those counters. When you flip it over, just write the combat values with firepower divided by 2 round down. Okay, so anyway, if you come up to the index, I didn't see weather. I mean, there's terrain. Not that I did not read it word for word, but I just don't see like a weather category. So the comment that I made was talking about baseline stats, if you will, for the game. So like in just a normal game, there's no penalties for nighttime, no penalties for weather, sliding off roads, these different things, because the baseline applies these penalties equally to everyone. So example, if you're playing in nighttime, there's a -2 modifier. I'm just saying, for example, you can say, well, there's a -2 that applies to every single person that fires. Now, because that's not in the rule book that I saw, someone had mentioned that it's possible that that information will be on the scenario card. Perfect. So, if you come down to section 14 of the rules, section 14, scenarios, it mentions the scenario card tells you the setup, the gut check number, coordinates of where everything gets set up. It says there will be a description of the battle, and then it says right here it will list any special rules or conditions to be used. So it's very possible that on the scenario card itself there could be conditions that say it's nighttime, -2 to shoot. Now, my original thought was why it wasn't in there is because since that is a baseline modifier that affects everyone, instead of having that be a unique condition, all you're doing now is extending the length of the game, because if you give a -2 modifier for everyone to shoot, that doesn't really reflect to me the fact that it's nighttime. I mean, that's the explanation, but everybody gets penalized by that, and so you haven't really changed the game per se. You're just making it tougher to shoot, therefore it drags the game out. That's not necessarily a fun simulation of nighttime. But let's just say, here's a but, how about you give the -2 penalty for nighttime, fine, but in the scenario description you say one side or both side get flares. And now what you can do is use a flare to illuminate a section of the map for a limited amount of time. Now see, I didn't see rules in here for illumination and stuff like that, but you could easily put that in on a special condition. I like that because what that allows you to do is modify that baseline situation. So yeah, there's a -2 penalty to shoot unless you're within the illumination area of the flare round or something like that. So I can see you don't have to have a lot of rules for things, you know, in the rule book, but you could put those on the scenario card. So great thought. Whoever shared that with me, I totally forgot who said, hey, it's on the scenario card. So perfect. So keep that in mind. I was even thinking like searchlights would be cool. You might say a scenario where you're attacking a defended position and the defender at night has a spotlight, and so they get to pick a hex like every turn or something, and it can only go out a certain amount of hexes, but anybody who's caught in the searchlight negates the -2 to hit penalty or something like that. So cool things to modify those baselines that then make having things like weather be, you know, interesting other than just it's a -2 for everybody. Cold weather, similar thing like that. You might say, well, Russian vehicles have heaters because they're used to the cold. boom, there's not a penalty here. German vehicles, unless they're within a certain range of, burning barrels, they get a penalty. That's cool. So bring on the different weather effects and stuff like that, and just make sure you read the scenario card for any special conditions. All right, so the next thing was talking about the depth of the project, and this was a good point too. My first video, I just pretty much just threw out speculations of different things, and someone said, well, why don't you talk about where the project's going, like what kind of depth they can see when you look at the game. Well, I specifically did not touch on that because we don't even have a game for this yet. This is just it's a Kickstarter project. Anything can happen. He could get the money and just decide to retire. I mean, I doubt it, but I'm just saying, before I wanted to talk about depth and growth of the system, how about give me a game first? All right. But to be fair, I did, when I first put the video up, one of the reasons I did subscribe was specifically because of this guy right here, Mark H. Walker. He has a phenomenal background. Like, before I even looked at this Kickstarter, I know him for his work at Lock and Load Publishing. And when you come down and you read through the Kickstarter bonuses, which we'll talk about, this one down here, the big one, the maximum supporter, if I had $500, I would do it, because I know Mark can put out content. So it says here, in 6 years, I'll select the reward, but it says in the 6 years that he owned Lock and Load Publishing, they released 61 products, and his name is stamped on almost all of that stuff. And well, maybe it is on all of it, but let me just tell you though, he's done a lot. And I said to myself, well, where can I go to find what he's done? You can go to Lock and Load Publishing, but I did and looked at some of the games, but it doesn't really give him credit for stuff he's done. So I said, well, where else could I find out about Mark and what he's done? Well, Boardgamegeek. If you go to Boardgamegeek and they do a search up at the top here, you can actually do a drop down, do a designer search, and then you just type in Mark's name, and he has his own entry. And if you come on down, there is a list of all the games that has his name attached to it as a designer, co-designer, but his name's on here. So if, like, for instance, All Things Zombies, a lot of people, I hear people talk about All Things Zombie. So you click on it, boom, designer Mark H. Walker, and you can look at the years. And 6 years, I think so. He was owned Lock and Load from 2007 to 2013. So this is one of the games that came out when he owned the company. And so, you can just kind of look and kind of get a feel for what he did. Like, I didn't know he did Lee at Gettysburg. Open it up, designer Mark H. Walker. And I love this guy here, Nicholas. I can't even pronounce his name. Love his counter art and his artwork. So that's another thing too that was really good about Lock and Load, was the counter art. And it looks like Old School will have some pretty good counter art for the vehicles. Infantry, that's a different story. But anyway, you can look, and there's like 5 pages here of things that if you click on it, you're going to find Mark's name. So you want to talk about depth. Lock and Load. Lock and Load is just basically, it's like an infantry squad level game, like Advanced Squad Leader. Excuse me, it has its own mechanics, but as you can see here, there's a lot of stuff for Lock and Load. I mention that because we're talking about depth of the project. Let me get a drink of water. I've learned I talk a lot. I need to drink water. Alright, so Lock and Load is like the flagship. I mean, Lock and Load Publishing, like the Lock and Load game. There's a lot to it. Nations at War, a good system. I really enjoyed it. It hasn't grown yet, hasn't like come to fruition quite yet. But they have Nations at War, the Rush and the East Front coming out. Disappointed. I think I'll see Old School before I see Nations at War. Nations at War is platoon level, but then that's the other thing too, is Mark's done real good with not only like squad level stuff, platoon level stuff. Let's hit another page. Oh, Stalingrad, A Walk in Hell. Let's see, where's Mark on here? Oh, the designer. Had to rethink these. These are some I've looked at before, and I was like, but I like the counter art. I just love the counter art. I mean, that's just me. I know that's not the focus of this, but I get sidetracked easily. Oh, the counters. Oh, I bet it's that Nicholas Scooby guy. Let's see, did he do the art? Hold on. Nope. Armchair. I don't know if he did the art. It just kind of had that feel. Alright, never mind. It looks like it came in a magazine. Alright, so anyway. So that's where the depth comes from. He's real good at adding content to his system, and he has said in some responses on the comments in the Kickstarter that he's going to support this game. And Shane, the designer, they have a lot of ideas. Alright, so depth. It will be there. I have a feeling it will be, and Mark has a proven track record for bringing stuff out. Alright, so the other thing, luck cards. Alright, that was a discussion that came up in the forums, and a very good comment came out. And I really dismissed the comment at first, but actually, to be fair, it's not a bad comment, because I think it might come maybe from a misunderstanding of the luck card system, or we might be overthinking it because the game's not out yet. So the comment was, the person said they didn't know how they felt about a game that your strategy for playing it revolved around the cards that you draw before the start of the game. And games that I can think of like that, Combat Commander, because that's completely card driven, Myanmar 44, card driven, Conflict of Heroes, not card driven, but you do start with a certain amount of cards that could dictate how you maneuver some forces after you start. Heroes of Normandy, you get some cards too. So there's a lot of games that you do get a handful of cards, and then you can replenish those cards as you play, that really could dictate how your strategy for the battle goes, because they give bonuses for different activities. So let's look at the rules real quick. Again, unless maybe modified by a scenario card, section 12 luck card says normally one luck card is drawn at random from the deck by each player at the start of the game. So if you just read through, it doesn't mention drawing more, it doesn't say you replenish, you get one. And I think what comes with it is like 18 cards. Let's look at the contents real fast. 18 luck cards. Shell, shock, evasive, maneuver, field repair. So there's 18 cards. So it's not like a card driven game. You don't get 4 or 5. It doesn't say you replenish them. You get 1. So I thought, well, what do these cards do? So if you go back to the Boardgamegeek and there it was. Let's look at some cards. Now these are, I'm just going to say, are not final representations of what it will look like, but here's a sample of what they're using as luck cards. So there's a double time, and it says add +3 to movement to any unit. Dig in, entrench any single, I'm assuming that would be like a unit or infantry unit or something like that. They entrench. The rules say that normally you entrench, but it takes like impulse points and stuff like this. But this here, boom, entrenched. But these are one-time use cards. It doesn't say you can keep using it over and over. And now there might be a card that says you can use it so many times. That might even be a special rule. But as you can see, you're going to have one card throughout the entire game, and you need to decide when do you use it. That is not a build my strategy around my one card. If I got something that says add +3 movement points to any unit, I'm just gonna hold on to that until I say, oh hey, I'm gonna move that one guy. I'm not gonna say, well, we're gonna focus everything through here because I get to move this one infantry ahead of everybody else. Dig in the entrenchment. Okay, great. I can entrench this guy, so I'm going to focus all my attention on entrenching this one guy. And the thing is, when you leave an entrenchment, the entrenchment's destroyed. So a lot of those cards, I think, are going to be of that type. They're just going to give you a little lucky bonus for when a situation arises. Now, a card, to be fair now, to say a card that could dictate some strategy would be something like a mortar attack. Boom, I drop it down here, and now it affects quite a bit of an area. Accuracy 4, firepower 4 where it drops, and 2 around. It's not much of an attack, but that could lend to some strategy, because now you got to think about, when do I want to use this? Do I want to lead this as an opening attack? Do I want to save it when I internalize some different objectives that could happen? Like if I'm supposed to move my troops from here to there, do I want to soften an area now and then work towards funneling to that spot? Or do I work up to the funnel, then drop it? Cards like that I could see you play into your strategy, but this is just me, my opinion. I don't think it's going to drive the overall strategy of the game, simply because it's not a card-driven game and you only get one according to the rules. Again, scenarios may change that, the rules may change that, and then you can house rule it. I've played plenty of times Conflict of Heroes where I didn't use cards. Plenty of times. Lots of times. You take Fighting Formations, for example. They got cards, but you don't have to play them other than you discard them so you can do special actions that, to fire your light machine guns and stuff like that. Use them as assets. It's a house rule thing. So if you're not a big fan of the cards, don't use them. Simple. And because you only draw one, it's not like you're totally gimping yourself. Now, what would be cool, okay, I love opposites, is if you made some bad luck cards. Alright, so not only do you have some cool stuff that could happen, but now you can do some stuff like you wounded somebody, or made me think of Combat Commander, because all their random events, some of this stuff is bad. So maybe a fire starts, cool stuff like that. Like, oh, I drew a fire starts. Sure, that might be sad at first, but it's like, oh wait, I can play it on my opponent. Alright, so then it's almost like this. So what you might do is draw it, and it might say, oh, one of my units is broken already. So bad luck. Like the expression, if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. So what I'd like to see is in the future an expansion of bad luck cards. that would be cool. Mix some of them in. So you could turn this into a cool thing as well, right? Take something you don't like, make it something you do like. All right, so anyway, luck cards. The odds table, I talked in length about this, I think, last time. I talk in length about everything. So the odds table, where I was talking about your kill stacks and how people will arrange their troops, whether it's a group fire or whatever, to try and get that 2-to-1 odd, 3-to-1 odds. And some comments that I saw were like, well, that makes sense. Why wouldn't you put as much firepower as you could at a target? Like, you're gonna bring that to bear. So obviously you're gonna want to bring eight troops, 8 infantry stacks. You're gonna overwhelming firepower. That makes sense. But there's a point where too much doesn't do any more good. When I was in the Army as a combat engineer, you learn some things, like, for example, explosives don't increase their lethality in a linear fashion. At some point, you're going to put on a certain amount of explosives, and yeah, it still does a lot of damage, but at some point that little bit is lost in amongst all the explosives you've put there already, and you would have to put a ginormous amount of explosives to reach a bigger effect. So if I have 10 pounds of plastic explosives and I add a little half a pound on, sure, I now have 10.5 pounds of explosives, but that little extra bit is kind of lost in amongst all that stuff. It's not a linear progression. And so when you look at your odds, like, for example, if my defender has defense of 10 and I have a firepower of 20, I'm at the 2-to-1 ratio. And in essence, if I bring 21 firepower, 22 firepower, 23 firepower, some of that extra firepower gets lost in that diminishing return, which makes sense, right? Because at some point, yeah, you're shooting a whole lot of bullets in there, but that's a whole lot of bullets going into places where there's no targets. It's just lost in amongst all the chaos of combat, until you hit that magical 3 times column. So if you can imagine a curve, your curve goes up, hits like the 2-to-1 odd, boom, that's a sweet spot number. And then the 21, 22, 23, your diminishing returns kick in because it's not modifying your odds. So you're like, oh, well, see, Eddie, that's realistic. You just told me If I add past a certain point, it's not benefiting me until, boom, I hit 30 firepower. Now I'm at 3 to 1. So it's like all of a sudden now I've jumped back up on my effect of firepower. So if you were to kind of graph it out, I'm not a math person, but in my mind I'm kind of envisioning, you know, my firepower hits a peak and then drops and drops, and then boom, spikes back up when I hit that magic number of 3 to 1. And to me, it just kind of seems goofy that you would have that, you know. What would make more sense to me is what the game currently has with the firepower system of just a set number here. Let's go back so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Here's a combat chart. Boom. So if I now bring, and you know, and I'm thinking at this from the scale of the game. You know, you're talking squad level. In the time frame, you know, you're not going to have a lot of time to just bring 800 people into an area and have them all attack one spot. You know, because at some point, once you start bringing in large numbers of troops, it's no longer squad level. You're now platoon level, division level, battalion, so on and so forth, or you know, battalion, division. You know, your hierarchies go up. So in a game like this, in the time frame they're trying to replicate, you know, you might bring to your 2 squads your squad leader, an attached weapon, and maybe you're going to hit your +7. There's your diminishing returns. Anything beyond that is just lost in the noise and chaos of combat, which makes sense for the scale that we're playing at, because by the time I can bring in several platoons, you know, I'm not playing a squad game anymore, so I've got all these platoons converging on one point. So the game, I did not look to see, I don't remember the grouped, I saw like group movement, I don't remember like group firing and stuff like that, but the point is, at some point you hit your diminishing returns, all that extra firepower doesn't make any sense. So having a firepower chart that ends at 7 or greater just simply means I can concentrate my firepower elsewhere on the map. I don't bring every single person I have to one spot and just make them a big old target for an artillery strike or bombs. You know, my troops are going to be spread out, and now I can effectively manage my firepower across an area and not have to worry about making kill stacks to take out one little spot because of my up and down power diminishing curve chart. +7, boom, that's it. I move on to the next thing. So that's kind of maybe a little more analysis of why I like this firepower chart versus the odds chart. I'm not trying to manipulate the game so much to try and hit these magical points of destruction. Obviously you are, it's a game, but I mean, you know, you're not tweaking the mechanic. It just seems so gamey to me. This, it is what it is. You know, my tank fires, you compare firepower, boom, it's what it is. Couple squads of machine gun, compare firepower to defense, boom, it is what it is. I prefer that. Okay, so the next thing, actually this is the last thing, stretch goals. Let's just take a look here real fast. This came up, this was actually put out by Mark, I believe, in the updates. So he said, apologize if we were swamping you with updates. I think that was a joke. So why a mystery, why a delay? So why are there no stretch goals? Currently, we've met both stretch goals. The Stalingrad map and the default, I don't know how you pronounce it, default. And there hasn't been another stretch goal posted. And when you read this, it kind of makes sense, because Mark is saying basically, if they put out a lot of stretch goals to try and entice you to buy into the game, then that could possibly delay when they get to send the game to the printer. Or, he didn't say this, but I have seen it with other games, they send part of the game to the printer, and then later down the road your stretch goals get printed and sent, and you're left waiting a very, very long time to get all this product. So in essence what he's saying is, hey, I don't want to overpromise, cause super huge delays in when you get your game, and then possibly get out not good quality stuff because we rushed to make it to the printer. So like a good example of this, when Heroes of Normandy came out, I did not buy it as a Kickstarter. I waited like a year, and I was able to get the second edition because the first edition came out and they put out, wow, lots of stuff. There was Cthulhu expansions, Dust expansions, like all kinds of stuff. And what happened was there's mistakes on some of the counters that came with the game. You know, like this, you know, not huge stuff, but, you know, this doesn't cost the correct amount, this had an incorrect damage value, this had a incorrect power, incorrect name. You know, so it's like little things that did not affect every single game you played, but may have affected some of the games you play. And then some of the items didn't even come out. And I know this happens in other Kickstarters too, because you can go and read the forums on BoardGameGeek, and people are like, hey, did you get this item yet from your Kickstarter package? And people are waiting for stuff. I watched a guy, he did an unboxing video, and he said, wow, I ordered this thing so long ago, I forgot that I even pledged for it. And another gentleman I watched today, he was unwrapping some miniatures he ordered, and he said, I've been waiting over a year for this, because these companies will stretch themselves out with all these different pledge goals. So me, I admit, I'm excited. I'm like, man, if I compare this to Night of Man, we've already hit like 2 stretch goals, and I don't think the first game they put out, I think it might have hit like 1 stretch goal. And I'm thinking, well, come on, let's get the next stretch goal. We got, you know, Stalingrad, we got the Fall, and if you do like every 5,000, they got pictures. They tease us and say, hey, if we, you know, really kick this thing in, look where else we could go. Well, I'm seeing a whole bunch of tanks here. I'm like, well, give me a Battle of Kursk map. You know, it doesn't have to be a whole, you know, thing, but just give me one more map that's like, you know, the Prokhorovka, or I can't pronounce stuff, I'm sorry. But, you know, give me something like that, a section of Kursk, and give me like a whole bunch of some, you know, give me some tigers and panthers and, you know, different things like that. I'd be happy until a full on box came out. But he's saying, I don't want to overcommit, otherwise your stuff won't get printed in time. Well, that makes sense. I still would like to see something, but I can understand why the hesitation. It's quite possible that they could put something out that would not require a whole lot of extra on their side. It might not be as exciting as an expansion of maps and counters. And you might say, well, gee, if this is a whole big system, how come all this stuff isn't already ready to go? Well, because it takes a long time to make board games, I've learned. And so they already probably have plans on expansions for stuff, but let them get this out. It's like a one at a time thing. Shoot, you go to Academy Games. I love them. They're Conflict of Heroes. They're slow. GMT Games. Love their stuff. In fact, other than my Conflict of Heroes and my Heroes of Normandy, I pretty much only own GMT Games. But they're slow as molasses too. You know, you get their email updates, and like every month it's, oh, our shipping container is still stuck somewhere. You know, that's the way they are, man. And so I would rather not delay this any more than possible. Which brings us quickly to the stretch goals. I'm a little bummed. I should say a little. But at some of these lower levels, there's a $20 pledge, $25 pledge, and I believe the $35 pledge. No, I think it's just 20 and 25. You're going to get PDF copies of the game. So the $20 pledge is great for print and play aficionados. You get the game months before everyone except for the early access supporters. Okay, so that to me is a very cool thing, because I would love to have that while I wait for my hard copy to come in. If you do the $25, it's another PDF print and play copy, but you're going to get an initial release. It says shortly after the game is funded. So who knows what that could mean. So if this gets done funding in March, April, you could have a PDF copy of initial playtest. Well, I say playtest, but initial PDF copies of the game. And then it says At some point you'll be able to get the whole game later on when the finalized PDF comes out. So I was hoping and have not heard, but it would be nice if the pledges for the full game were able to get access to the PDF copies, just so we could start playing as well and see the game for ourselves. So for those who aren't sure what level of pledge, because I know there's folks out there that aren't quite sure, $70 gets you the game. You need to add your shipping to that, so it's like 83 bucks. There's a deluxe at 85. Okay, but those are the copies of the game, and then there's the 110 where you get like 2 copies. Those are for like the retailers and stuff, unless you really want all these extra things. But if you're just kind of like, meh, I'm not sure, but I want to be involved, well then look at the $25, well the $20 pledge, $25 pledge for the PDF samples, because then, you know, if you print and play or just want to check it, take a look at the components and stuff like that, that's going to give you a pretty darn good idea of what the final game would be like. There is a 35, which is like the light game. It's not a PDF, but you get like 1 map and enough counters and pieces to play. It says here 6 scenarios, and it comes in a Ziploc bag. So that's kind of like the old school games where, well, the Ziploc war games. So that's cool at 35 bucks. So if you're not quite sure if you want to dive into a $70 pledge or higher, you may want to consider one of these lower pledges, and you possibly will get to see the game before everybody else who has ordered the hard copy. So just some thoughts there that might get you involved into the backing of the project if you weren't sure. So thank you so much. This is a little bit longer than the other video, but I really hope it's clarified some questions that you may have had that the first video brought up. This will probably be the last thing I put out. I say probably, but again, I like to talk, so maybe there will be another video. I just don't see the need to do too much for a Kickstarter thing. But if you would like to see more, just shoot me some comments, whether it's on YouTube or Boardgamegeek, questions that you would like me to speculate on. Super duper, and we'll put something else out. Alright, thanks a lot everybody. Talk to you later. Good night.